Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and in this video, which has been very kindly sponsored by Metro Hobbies, I'm going to build this Das Werk SDKFZ2 Kleines Kettenkrad. If you like what you see in this video, and you would like to buy this kit for yourself, there will be a link in the description where you can do that. This is a 1/35th scale plastic kit, and as the box lets us know, it includes engine and drivetrain detail, single track links, and a driver figure. The back of the box tells us nothing at all. We will have a very brief look at what's in the box here, but I did make a more in-depth what's in the box video a while ago, so feel free to check that out if you want a better look at the sprues and to hear me waffling about them a little bit. Suffice to say that the parts look pretty decent, and having built the model I can say that there are some bits that required a bit more cleanup than others, but overall it's pretty good. The instructions are decent and easy to follow, though I did have one or two moments of uncertainty. Also, as I mentioned in the What's in the Box video, the decals were not included in my box, which was a bit of a disappointment, but of all the things to be missing, decals isn't that big a problem. Okay, let's glue some plastic together. As instructed by the instructions, I start by assembling the engine and drivetrain part. This is pretty easy to do. You just put glue in the middle and sandwich it together, using the keying to guide it, as you would normally do with keying. It does have one issue though. I don't think the drivetrain end is meant to bend off to one side like it does. It's kind of slight and I applied some pressure to try and bend it the other way, but you can still see that it's not perfect. Though I have to say it doesn't seem to have affected it too much, so maybe it's not a big deal. Next, this pair of caps. I don't know, I guess they're part of the transmission. They go on these axle bits here, and I was able to get this done with no issue. I follow that with this set of pedals. These were kind of fiddly to get into place, and I had to apply a fair bit of pressure to do that. Because of its position, I had to use the back of my knife because I couldn't get my fat fingers in there. Then, why not add a piece of engine to the rest of the engine? I don't know what this is, which is definitely going to surprise you, but it does seem to stay in place with friction, which is nice, though I do add glue anyway because I would like it to stay there. This other engine-y bit also goes into place easily and will stay there with friction. And again, so we don't upset the glue god, we apply glue. Unless you're planning to leave the engine door thing open, these engine details aren't going to be visible, so I guess you could leave them off if you prefer, but it doesn't really hurt anything to have them there either. The next step is to glue that engine assembly onto the floor part. This is keyed and pretty simple to get into place. You can see that that transmission part is still not perfectly straight, but I don't think it's going to be visible once the model is complete anyway. I follow that with a pair of platey parts, which I guess are intended to protect the driver's feet from rotating transmission parts or something. They're a little bit fiddly to get into place under the pedals, but it's not impossible. I mean, I've managed to do it, so you can too. Then comes this plate, which probably has a name, like John or Ralph or something. This is used for mounting things like this gear stick. There's nothing too tricky about installing this. I then attach the pole to the bottom of the driver's seat, or I guess you might call it a saddle. It doesn't look very comfortable. The assembly then mounts into place on the plate part, whatever we decided to name that. You'll need to nudge it around a bit so that it's nice and vertical, but this isn't too hard to do. Now it's time to prepare the sides of the Kettenkrad. This involves installing an axle in the rearmost hole at the bottom here, like so. This just drops right into place, and of course our good friend glue makes sure that it won't come back out again. Then, this internal wall part can go on. There are some rather obvious guide pins for this, which will help hold the inner wall at the correct distance away from the outer one. This is the same for both sides of the vehicle. Assembling the front plate, I guess you might call it, is similar. There's an internal part and it's got pins and sockets. I believe I assembled this slightly incorrectly. The inner part should sit a bit further forward, maybe at an angle. We'll see why this matters later. Moving on, I glue the sides of the Kettenkrad to the base, which is pretty simple. There's keying, and it is largely effective, though there is a bit of a gap that I'm pretty sure shouldn't be there at the rear. I took care of that with some more glue and a bit of pressure. This is the same on both sides. I follow this with the front section. This is pretty gappy, though it can be mitigated a little bit with pressure. Despite those efforts, I am almost certainly going to have to use some putty here later on. Next comes this plate, which goes in the rear. I'm cutting off the guide pins here because they wouldn't go into the mounting holes no matter how I tried. This is an example of why test fitting is such a good idea. You can find these things out before using glue and making a mess. It's also worth test fitting with the seat part. I glue the plate in and then the seat, which goes into place with no hassle. To improve passenger comfort, I add the backrest for the seat. The mounting slots for this are clearly different in size, which makes sure that you can't easily put it on backwards. After all, nobody wants a backwards backrest. Next comes the shovel, which mounts onto the right side of the hull. The shovel itself is easy to put on. There are some mounting bracket things though, and these are kind of fiddly. The fit is tight, and because they're small, they're not so easy to maneuver, but tweezers did help. I eventually got them into place, and it doesn't look too bad. There is meant to be an axe on the other side, with the same mounting brackets, though both of them flew away when I tried to press them over the axe handle, so I just decided to leave that off. I then install the top of the sidewall bits, for lack of better words. The fit on these is not great, and I found I had to apply a lot of pressure. Also, I did them in sections. I glue the rear section first, apply pressure, and once it's in place, I add glue onto the front part and apply pressure again. The result isn't too bad really, and the gaps aren't that bad, it's just that it took a little bit more work than I would have liked it to. Then comes the engine cover. I think it might have been a bit easier to put this on before the previous parts, but you can squeeze it into place anyway. Just try not to break the mounting pins off. This could be left so that it can open and close, but I decided that I would prefer it to be glued solidly in place. I made an effort to have the gaps along the sides of this part look as even as I could. On top of that, I glue this thing, which looks like a small roll, maybe for covering the driver's area when the Kettenkrad is parked. Next, it's time to install the dashboard. Here you can see that it doesn't quite fit over the front wall parts. The inner wall is a bit too far back, it would seem. I dealt with it by gluing the dashboard part somewhere in between to eliminate the gaps as best I could. It's not perfect, but it was about as good as I could manage. A pair of hooks for the front come next, and these were pretty easy to get into place with a little bit of nudging. The open part of the hook should face upward, so do be sure to put them on the right way. Suspension for the road wheels comes next. These little arms are easy enough to install, though owing to their size they are a little bit fiddly. There's a guide pin to ensure that they sit at the correct angle and all of the wheels are nice and even. Obviously there's a set of these arms for both sides of the vehicle. Speaking of wheels, now seems like a really good time to make some of those, starting with the drive sprocket. It's a kind of wheel, a toothy wheel. There's an extra pair of these on the sprues for some reason, so if you wanted, you could have spares as stowage. I make the idler wheels next, and these do look very similar to some of the road wheels, though they are a different size. There's keying to line these parts up, but you still need to rotate the wheels around so that the spokes align, which is pretty simple. The middle road wheels go together in the same way, except they're slightly bigger, and there's 4 of them. Once those are together, we might as well start adding wheels to the hull. First, 2 inner road wheels go on the second and fourth axles. I then add the drive sprockets to the front. There's nothing tricky about mounting these, they just plop straight on. The idler wheels come next. It seems the outer road wheel will overlap with this, so I expect it would be kind of hard to add the idler after the outer road wheels. The spoked middle road wheels come next, and I'm not totally sure I've got these around the right way, or if it matters, but they do seem to fit pretty well. Also, do be sure not to mix these up with the idler wheels, they do look very similar. And finally, the outer road wheels. These also contact the middle set of wheels, so I make sure there's plenty of glue to bond everything together. I think this having different styles of road wheels looks pretty interesting. I'm not sure why it's like that, but it is cool. The instructions would have liked the tracks to be installed next, but I just didn't feel like it. So I move on and I glue the 2 halves of this thing together. This has keying, but I found there was some play in it and a little bit of nudging and eyeballing had to be done. The towing hook comes next. There's a U-shaped mounting point for this, and it's fairly easy to get positioned. The instructions show this having a large pin on it, but that doesn't appear on the part. I'm not sure if this is a defect or not, but all of the pictures show a pin here as well, so maybe it is. Next, onto the whatever you might call it that we put together a few moments ago, I add what I think is a rear convoy marker, and below that, a number plate. I had to do a bit of nudging, but they do go on easily enough. And then, why not install that assembly onto the rear here, like so. I had to do some more nudging here to get it to look nice and straight relative to the rest of the vehicle, but I think it's ended up looking okay. I follow this with some mud flaps. These were simple enough to install, but I was a little unsure if they were actually needed. They don't appear in any of the images in the colour guides, or on the box art, only in the illustration towards the front of the instructions. I've added them anyway. They seem like they'd be easy enough to remove later if you changed your mind. Now it's time to build the front wheel assembly, which was actually a fairly fiddly process. I start with this bar thing, which gets sandwiched between the two parts that form the neck thing, the part that connects the steering wheel part to the rest of the vehicle. Technical terms. I don't know them. I had to apply pressure here to minimize the gap using my tweezers because I couldn't do it with my fingers without moving the steering bit out of place. Then I add this pair of springs, and there are guide pins to mount this part onto. I attach one side of the framey part next, and I don't suppose it matters which half we add, but I've gone with the left side. I take the wheel and sandwich it between the previous assembly and the right half of the framey bit. This does seem like it should be pretty easy, and to be fair, it's not super hard, but it is a little bit more fiddly than I was expecting. I try to make sure that everything is lined up nice and straight, and then I install the no-tech light. My fingers are too big, so I use my tweezers to install it and nudge it into position. Then, I attach the front wheel assembly to the hull. I figured having this in place now would make it a bit easier to install the headlamp and handlebars. Speaking of handlebars, I installed the headlamp next. There are a pair of pins for this to mount onto, and I use my tweezers to pull the part up and onto those pins, as you can see. It would make sense to then add the front of the lamp. Again, because of my fat fingers, I had to use my tweezers to apply pressure and eliminate the gap. I suppose you could probably assemble the lamp, and then squeeze it in between the mounting pins, or even sandwich it between the frames at the same time as the wheel, but that seems like it would add unnecessary fiddliness. Handlebars come next, and they more or less just drop right into place, though I did have to nudge them back and forth a bit until they looked like they lined up with the front wheel. It's probably not quite perfect, but it's close enough for me. Next comes this lever thing. I have no idea what it's for. You mount it in through this brackety part here, and then down into the same mounting plate that the seat and gear stick are on. This is a little bit fiddly to do, but obviously not impossible. Then I add some small things. These go into the mounting holes on either side of the engine cover. I've no idea what these are, but they're not hard to install. And now for something I don't usually do. I'm going to assemble the driver figure. I start by gluing the two halves of the legs together. Is saying two halves of the legs redundant? Whatever, the legs go together easily enough. I then insert the head into the hat. The head is missing the top of the skull, so you can't model this fellow without his hat. Then we add the head to the legs. This is what we look like, isn't it, fellow human? Maybe that's not true. I glue the torso to the legs. The belt should work to hide the fact that there is a slight gap there, just as long as the gap isn't too big. Arms come next, and none of these parts are keyed, so you're going to have to do some eyeballing. I found it helpful to sit the figure in his seat and nudge the arms so that they look like they'll be holding the handlebars. It's not going to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. Close enough anyway. The arms are going to need a little bit of putty in the joints, but it's not too bad. It seems like a good idea to capitate the man, which is surely the opposite of decapitate, which is what we're doing. Anyway, the figure is pretty easy to put together. I'm not sure I really like it though. He does have a kind of bored expression. Can you be bored while driving a Kettenkrad? Surely that's against the law. Anyway, the final step is the tracks. Actually, I did put a few links together when the instructions wanted me to, but I figured I should show all of the track stuff at the same time. Joining the links themselves together is pretty easy. They simply press together, though if you do try to move them, they'll come apart quite easily. The idea is that once the links are together, this pad can be glued into place, and I suspect that you're supposed to be incredibly neat with the glue, and I did try to be. It would seem you are supposed to glue the pad into place, and it should stop the links from coming apart while allowing them to be workable. It sounds good in theory, but it didn't work for me. I mean, the parts did go together, but the links were bonded together. The tracks do look good, but they're not workable, so how I did it was in sections. I put one long straight section together, glued it to the bottom of the road wheels, then I built in sections and added them as they were done. The bending is why I did this in sections. It has to be done before the glue has a chance to completely set. It took me a while to add all of the pads, which, owing to how small the parts are, is quite fiddly, as you can imagine. So if I were to build all of the track links in one go, by the time I'd got all of the links together with the pads on, it would have been all bonded and unable to bend around the wheels. The tracks were quite time consuming and just a little bit annoying to do, and I wish either the links would stay together with friction or the pads were included as part of the link. I think the result is pretty good though, so maybe it was worth it. Though I really didn't enjoy doing these tracks. That's why I did all but 5 links off stream, so I wouldn't have to sit there and do them in one long session. Anyway, that's the Werk Kettenkrad in 1/35th scale completed. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. It's not perfect, and there are a few gaps that are going to need to be filled in before painting, but I guess that's the case for a lot of models, isn't it? There were a few fit issues along the way, but I think I overcame most of them, and I think the only thing I really messed up was having the mounts for the axe on the left side go flying. They were so tiny that I didn't bother looking for them. We can just make up a story that careless Hans has used the axe and left it behind somewhere. That careless Hans, what a jerk. Anyway, for the most part I did enjoy building this model. The tracks and some of the more fiddly steps were a little bit less than fun, but on the whole, I enjoyed myself. It took a bit longer to complete this than I was hoping. In fact, the video was even quite late for patrons, because up until the last moment I was busy assembling tracks. Or at least that's how it felt. It really is a lot of small tracks. Ah well, what's modelling without a few small challenges from time to time? It's probably good for you, especially if you get something cool out of it. And in this case, I have. I really like the Kettenkrad. It's such a goofy, fun-looking vehicle. I mean, having never driven one in real life, I can only assume that it's fun, but I'm pretty sure it is. As I mentioned at the beginning, Metro Hobbies have sponsored this video and were kind enough to send me this kit to build and show you. If you like what you see, there is a link in the description through which you can buy this kit from Metro Hobbies. There's also a more general link that you can use to peruse their various items, and there are a lot of cool things available. So a very big thank you to Metro Hobbies. It's very much appreciated. If you've got any questions or comments, it would be great to see those in the comments section below. If you've built one of these, or any other cool models and you want to share, why not drop by our Discord community and share some photos? We'd love to see what you've done. If you want to watch me build kits like this live on stream, head over to my Twitch channel, the link for which is in the description. And if you haven't done so already, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch when I'm live. Links to all of my things are in the description below, and as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thank you for watching. Farewell.